How about I start almost every episode. I think if we were to tally it, I you have started like maybe 3 episodes. How about you start?
Okay.
Yay!
Hello, good morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to GC Squared. This is a show where normally introductions are done by my wonderful co host, and that wonderful co host is Taylor. Now, Taylor, when you're not busy discovering the inner machinations of people's minds, you're usually looking at comic books. So tell us what's been going on in the world of comic books.
The inner machinations of the human mind, huh?
Yeah,
Cool.
we've all been there.
Oh, well, let's see. In the world of comic books and comic book stuff, um, couple of interesting things to note, and this one we might circle back to this later when we get to the main topic. But DC Comics has realized that they've come up on their 100 years, their technical 100 years, not the beginning
Okay.
everyone like associates with them, but their first comic is now 100 years old.
Oh, snap.
Yeah. So, as kind of a celebration of that, they've been going back and reprinting the most significant book of, I forget if they're going decade or if they're going by year. I'm pretty sure it's just going to be decade.
Okay.
But they recently just reprinted that first comic and I picked it up recently.
Nice. What's the comic?
It's it has the most non-confusing name possible. It is just called Fun Comics Magazine.
Oh, yes. There you go.
Yeah. And I mean, I haven't gone through and read it quite yet. I just got it. But uh, it was very much a magazine that was trying to highlight what kids of, I guess, 1925, what they would have been interested in. Um, there's no superheroes because superheroes really weren't a thing yet, but the comics
Understandable.
are based on like westerns, and they'll talk about like the latest and greatest movies that are coming in, and they'll talk about the latest and greatest sports stars. So probably just a lot of baseball. I don't know what
Fair
other
enough.
sports they would have been playing.
Yeah, I know nothing about sports, really.
Well, it's just that like at least in America, baseball kind of ruled the world for a long time. And I don't know what other, I guess maybe football. I don't know. I haven't read it, so I'm going to have to tell you about how that went later, I suppose.
Okay, sounds good.
Um, Marvel rebooted the Ultimate Universe, I should say, a while back, which was a huge deal because you've played the Ultimate Spider-Man video game.
Yes, that's probably one of my favorite Spider Man video games.
It's so good. It it's unfortunate that it's kind of stuck in the console generation that it is, but uh, that was based off of the Ultimate Spider-Man comic book, which was part of this big Ultimates universe that included all the other characters as well, and was basically a modern setting retelling of everybody's story, right?
Okay.
After a while, they canceled it, and it's like after a long while, like it lasted for a very, very long time. Uh, but it got to the point where the only part of that universe that was really going anywhere was Miles Morales. He was introduced in the Ultimates books, and so they canceled the Ultimates universe, and through shenanigans, found a way to put Miles and his family and his supporting cast into the main Marvel universe and just pretend like that was always the case, right?
Okay, gotcha.
They recently brought it back, recently, as in like late last year, brought it back, and it's been doing numbers, right? Like it's been really popular. Uh, They basically
Makes
took
sense.
the old story, the old universe, and said, okay, we're going to say that time kept on moving forward. So we have like a Spider-Man who's a father with two kids, and we have various other characters that were like a little bit less cleanly rewritten, but it was supposed to be a continuation of that universe. And they decided they were going to cancel it again. But what's
Okay.
interesting about this cancellation isn't that the Ultimates didn't last very long, even though it was incredibly popular. It's that it's coinciding with a lot of writers switching between publishing studios as well as switching between books. And it looks like Marvel might be doing their first actual, like, line wide reboot here pretty soon. That's the theory, anyway.
Huh. That sounds
Now,
interesting.
yeah, it's if they do that, that'll be huge because Marvel currently holds the record for the longest continuous story, right? Uh, you pick up their first ever comic book of you pick up Marvel Comics #1 that introduces the Golden Age Human Torch, and that book is in canon all the way up to today. Nothing has been done to erase it. That is huge. That is significant. DC has had several line wide reboots, and it will be interesting to see what would change and what would happen if Marvel were to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's fair because since they've never done it before, it makes sense that it would naturally draw attention.
Yeah. Um, we'll have to see if those rumors mean anything. Right now, there is something of a reset going on. Like they recently reset Captain America, uh, so that uh, the rubber banding timeline of Marvel, it's silly. But Captain America goes into the ice at the end of World War II, and then it's always been understood that he was thawed out of the ice at some ambiguous time afterwards. But everyone's been kind of afraid to put a solid year to it. But it does mean that he's lived through an awful lot of modern American history while still complaining that he's been in the modern age longer than he's ever been in World War II, right? Like, and it's weird that he still feels out of place. Now, uh, they recently reset him so that he was thawed out of the ice, and I think they brought him out in it was post 9/11, and that was the big controversy there because his 9/11 books were really significant, and this reset kind of erases those from the canon. But anyway, all I'm getting at here is that ooh, all I'm getting at here is that there does seem to be this resetting happening in the Marvel universe, but it could turn into something bigger.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, we'll just have to see what happens. It's always cool when you can kind of theorize what's going on and what companies are planning.
Hmm. And I think that's what I've got. So let's head over to my good friend Garrett. Now, when Garrett isn't introducing the podcast, he is usually doing something with video games. So, my good friend Garrett, tell me a little bit about video games. Tell me about Clear Obscure 33. How's that going for you? Is that still good?
Yeah, that game is awesome, and I'm really hoping, really hoping it wins Game of the Year because I think that will cause a big shift in the gaming industry that's necessary. So, here's hoping for the best. Here's hoping that succeeds. And yeah, I actually haven't played it in a bit just because I've been busy with other games and stuff, but it's all good. Yeah, I really need to get back to my second playthrough on that. That's one thing though, is once you be in the game once, it's kind of easy to just kind of be more pick up and go with it, you know?
Yeah. So,
Yeah, so I've been. Sorry?
I was just going to say it would be shocking to me if it didn't win Game of the Year just because it is nominated in, like, every category.
Yeah, it's gonna have The Last of Us syndrome, I think.
The Last of Us is a good game.
Yeah, remember when The Last of Us Part 2 was winning like everything?
Yeah, I don't know if The Last of Us Part 2 deserved to win everything, but that's okay.
It is what it is. I think that kind of caused a bit of a shakeup with the Game Awards where they were like, oh, maybe we should listen more to gamers because The Last of Us Part 2 was an interesting situation where lots of reviewers loved it, but then a lot of gamers didn't like it because of some story decisions they made.
Well, I haven't played it myself, but I had friends who did,
Hmm.
and uh, everyone I talk to, the consensus seems to be we don't necessarily care if the story decisions they chose to go with happened, but it was the order of events in which they happened.
That's what I've heard as well. Spoilers for anyone that cares about spoilers for The Last of Us Part 2. So, yeah, I've heard that before where like cuz they do this thing where to kind of hook you at the start, they have that, whole group go in and kill Joel right at the start. And, Joel's kind of the fan favorite character that everyone loves. So now, of course, their initial impression and their initial feelings to this group of people is going to be, oh my gosh, I freaking hate these guys. They suck. But if they had just played it out in the events, like in order of timeline, you would see how they came to that conclusion of killing Joel, and it would make it much more less so of a slap in the face and more so of like a tragic hero death type situation for Joel.
I can also understand why Naughty Dog would choose to go with that, and especially the directors of The Last of Us Part 2 would choose to go in that direction, with the order of storytelling, I mean, because easily Naughty Dog's well, not easily anymore, but for a long time, Naughty Dog's highest acclaimed game was Uncharted 2. And one of the biggest praises that Uncharted 2 got was that the hook at the very beginning, where Nathan Drake is inside of a train that's falling off of a mountain in the Himalayas, is really, really, really good. And it carried a lot of momentum for the story through, the initial setup and all of the tutorial levels by putting you in this crazy situation. And
Hmm.
since then, Uncharted 3 did that. The Last of Us Part 1 didn't, because The Last of Us Part 1 did have a time jump, but it was uh, the beginning of the pandemic and then uh, the climax of it. Like you jump between there.
Yeah.
And
I would say
then,
that's kind of. Oh, sorry.
no, and then The Last of Us Part 2 begins with like the middle of the story and then goes back, which is very Uncharted of them.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say though, like you can identify hooks at the start without like starting in the middle of the story, And I get that it worked with Uncharted, but it clearly worked with The Last of Us Part One, where the hook at the start, like you said, was the beginning of the zombie outbreak. Like that's a very solid hook to get people interested in the story, and you immediately see why Joel is the way he is by the events that play out.
Right. Um, anyway, so Claire Obscure 33, if it doesn't get Game of the Year, I will be shocked because not only is it critically acclaimed, but it is player acclaimed. Like, this thing is going to sweep awards.
The only people that seem to be upset with Claire Obscure are the really big companies.
Well, I was
Yeah,
reading,
so that's sorry.
I keep interrupting. I'm so sorry. But I
It's
was
all good. We're
reading,
getting used. Sorry.
my turn. No, I was reading this article this morning actually where the uh developers of Silk Song, was it?
Yeah.
They were asked about the Game Awards and they're like, "Oh yeah, there's no way we're going to win with Clair Obscur 33 sweeping like it is." But we're just glad that people like our game.
Yeah.
So,
Silk Song was so popular that other games pushed back and moved around their release times once Silk song like Shadow dropped. Oh, by the way, it's about to come out. They were like, well, we can't compete with that. We don't want to hurt our sales, so we're pushing our game back.
That's why we haven't had GTA 6.
That's the thing is that GTA 6 is kind of a ticking time bomb for the AAA industry because the second they announce when it's coming out, everything's going to get pushed around it.
Well, they have announced several dates. It's just they keep pushing it back.
True.
But like, there's all kinds of conspiracy theories that they're afraid the game isn't actually going to be all that good and they need the Game of the Year award. And so they've been pushing it around to see if they can find a year where they could easily win it.
Dang. You can't really predict that though with the gaming industry, especially with like sudden hits coming out of nowhere. I mean, even last year, was anybody really expecting Astrobot to win Game of the Year?
No, nobody did. And all of a sudden, this fun little platformer, a console exclusive of all things, gets nominated, and it's like, how in the world did Astrobot win? I'm glad it did, but like, what were the other games it was up against? Wasn't it up against Black Myth Wukong?
Yeah, I'll take a look to see what games it was up against. Yeah, okay, so yeah, there were some interesting picks in there actually. It was up against Balatro, which was a surprise indie hit. Cool to see that up there. Do you
Oh
know what
yeah, it was up
Balatro is?
against it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a mobile game. But now I'm remembering it was also up against the DLC for Game of the Year.
Yeah. So it was up against Balatro, Black Myth Wukong, Elden Ring Shadow of the Air Tree, which is DLC, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and Metaphor ReFantasio.
How in the world did Astrobot win?
I obviously it was a game that stood on its own and did well enough where it was recognized for its success. Like, but you're right, there were some heavy hitters in there, so it's awesome to see a game like Astrobot win.
That was a fun Game Awards too. I don't know if you watched the Game Awards, but they had Statler and Waldorf from the Muppets
Yeah, I
uh,
remember that.
jeering the guy, and I'm surprised that there's any empty seats out here. I hear you always sell out. Go! So funny.
Yeah, it's interesting to go back and look at these different games and who won what and everything. And, good on Balatro. It did win Best Mobile Game of the Year. So I'd say that's well deserved.
Anyway, so what else about video games? So what's been going on in your life?
Yeah, so because of, Black Friday sales, I definitely took advantage of that and bought some stuff. So I was actually able to recently complete my Guitar Hero collection on Xbox 360. I now officially own every Guitar Hero game on Xbox 360.
Nice. Nice. What's your favorite one so far?
Okay, so the thing is I grew up and played a ton of Guitar Hero growing up. Like I was really, really into it. Played online, played through all the games, played expert mode on every song. Pretty much anything you can think of, I was doing.
Okay.
So with that in mind, for me personally, my all-time favorite from a from a balance of both gameplay and music selection, I adore Guitar Hero Warriors of Rock, which is the sixth and final mainline game.
Nice to hear they ended on a high note. Well, didn't they recently release a Guitar Hero that didn't go anywhere?
There was Guitar Hero Live, which had interesting concepts, but immediately alienated the core audience.
Mm.
So, you know how with Guitar Hero you have the 5 buttons, right?
5 buttons.
What they did was they turned it into 6 buttons with 3 on top and 3 on the bottom.
6 strings.
Well, more like 2 strings with 3 frets each.
Okay.
So you're only really using your pointer, middle, and ring finger, and you're sliding it up and down to play either the white notes or the black notes.
Hmm.
It did have, but that immediately made it dead on arrival because immediately people were like, "Well, I'm not really interested in this new style," while other people were like, "Well, um, this isn't the Guitar Hero I know. I don't want to play that. So, yeah, it didn't do well at all. But it did have some interesting concepts. One interesting concept it had was because it was called Guitar Hero Live, when you performed and went through the story mode, the campaign, you were standing on the stage seeing through the eyes of the guitarist.
Feel like
And
that's
they used
pretty limiting though, because I remember my only experience are with Lego Rock Band and Beatles Rock Band. But a big part of the fun there was that you kind of had like this m- pseudo music video going on in the background rather than, being stuck to one single person's perspective.
Yeah, yeah, and that's always been cool. That's kind of the approach they've always taken is taking different camera angles as if you're watching a music video or you're watching the big screen of an actual concert performance, things like that. And actually it's to the point where they could get really creative. Like if you've played, you mentioned the Beatles Rock Band specifically, they got super creative with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, half their career was spent just in a studio, so it's not like you could rely on concert style footage because they didn't have any.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it was really cool to see some of the most creative art direction I've seen in a rhythm, specifically in a Guitar Hero Rock Band game. If you want to see, in my opinion, one of the coolest design set pieces in regards to like how they portray it and the angles they use and everything, watch Guitar Hero Warriors of Rock rendition of Bohemian Rhapsody.
That sounds like it would be really cool. Well, I'll put it on the list of things to do.
Yeah, it recreates a bunch of stuff from the original music video and it's really cool.
Rock on. Okay.
Yep, so definitely like that. But anyway, so Guitar Hero Live, it was interesting though because it was full motion video, all live action actors and stuff while you're seeing through the eyes of the guitarist.
Oh.
And then for DLC, I guess they didn't feel like doing any of that again, so they would just play the music video in the background.
Oh, that's lame.
It did have an interesting feature that I think caused people to misconstrue how the game worked as well. It had what was called live radio or live TV or something along those lines, where all of the DLC in the game would be randomly shuffled in there and playable for free.
Oh, that's pretty legit though. That actually sounds kind of like what Fortnite's version of it does, where they'll have like the featured songs, and every week you go in, there's a different list of featured songs, and you can purchase those songs and tracks to play later, but in the meantime, you have them available.
Yeah, so it was really cool because you could go and you could select any songs that you bought, but you could also go through like this random playlist of songs that would just be streaming and playable all the time. That way, if you played something you liked, you then had the option to immediately buy it if you want, but it gave you the option to try out songs before you bought them. Because funny enough, that's something I used to do when I was a teenager, is before I would buy songs for Guitar Hero Rock Band as DLC, I would go look them up on YouTube and see if the charts looked fun before I bought them. Because, like, with those games, it's a mix of not only choosing good songs, but the songs gotta be fun to play?
Yeah. Well, I've had a lot of friends who play guitar, and whenever they sit down for Guitar Hero, I had one friend uh, like rage out over the song on Guitar Hero 3. I forget which one it was, because uh, they knew how to play it on actual guitar, and it's so much easier on actual guitar than it was in Guitar Hero.
Yeah, things don't translate perfectly, obviously, there. But, my point being, though, is you may be wondering, so what was the issue with that, like, Guitar Hero Live TV thing?
Yeah, so what was the issue with that Guitar Hero Live TV thing?
Uh, The issue was it was such a focus and such an advertising point for it to the point where people misunderstood what it was. They thought it wasn't like, oh, check it out. You can check out the DLC for free. They thought it was, oh, you can't choose any song in the game ever. You can only play random songs.
Hmm.
So you can definitely imagine why that would make people not want to buy that.
Yeah, that I can see that, but then I don't know. I feel like the bigger risk and the bigger failing would be the change in how the guitar controlled and how the because like when you say Guitar Hero, I expect it to pick up and play just like it always has.
hmm
Uh, and I get that kind of means you're limited to the form factor of the controller, but I think there's a reason why uh, Guitar Hero Live didn't take off and Fortnite did. And both of them have that whole live TV model
Yep.
style of gameplay. But the Fortnite one feels like Guitar Hero. It feels like coming home.
Well, it makes sense because they literally got the original creators of Rock Band to make it. And Rock Band is actually the ones that originally created the first few Guitar Hero games.
So yeah, there you go. I think that's
Yep.
probably the bigger thing is that it says it's Guitar Hero, but it doesn't look like Guitar Hero and doesn't feel like Guitar Hero.
Exactly. So it's just kind of dead on arrival, unfortunately.
Yeah, which is too bad because I really would love to see those rhythm games come back, and I guess they did. I guess you have. I keep bringing up Fortnite, but there's also Clone Hero,
Yeah,
and
Clone Hero has become so popular that people have made Twitch streams off of playing Clone Hero.
oh, I see it on TikTok all the time where people are just playing along to like full length movies.
Yeah, they'll do all kinds of funny stuff. It's great.
All right,
But yeah,
so
oh sorry.
do you have any more video games?
Yeah, Black Friday deals, got stuff like that. I have all the mainline Rock Band games on Xbox as well, so that's nice. And then also I have I was able to grab Persona 3 Reload for the Switch too because of a good Black Friday deal, so I'm happy about that.
Nice, nice.
Yep, so yeah, that's pretty much it for me. I was playing a really crappy Twisted Metal clone on the PS2 earlier.
Well, speaking of the PS2,
Are you suggesting that the PS2 may have something to do with the topic at hand we have today?
I am, and the topic that we have on hand today, uh, dear listeners and everyone else, is where we ran into an interesting situation, or at least I remember hearing this. I'm sure you've had this experience. We look at Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, right? And San Andreas takes place in the 80s. And somebody pointed out that if you were to take the time difference between when the game takes place and when the game was released and bring it to today, the game would take place in 2006. And I felt really, really old all of a sudden. So this brings up kind of the ultimate question of what exactly is retro? What does retro mean? And I guess how do we feel about it?
Well, I think a good way to start off is looking at the Merriam Webster definition of retro.
Ooh, look at us being all fancy and scholastic. Too bad I don't have that definition handy right now.
I do, though.
Whoa. All right, Professor Garrett, tell me what's up.
It is the definition of retro as an adjective is relating to, reviving, or being the styles and especially the fashions of the past, fashionably nostalgic or old fashioned.
So that's cool. But I guess now the next question is if we're talking about fashionably nostalgic, at what point does nostalgia begin?
Yeah, exactly. Does that mean we look up the definition of nostalgia?
Is is that what we're doing today? That's what we're doing today.
I'll look it up, why not?
Sure.
Nostalgia, noun, also from Merriam-Webster. A sad pleasure experienced in recalling what no longer exists. A wistful or sentimental yearning for a return to or the return of some real or romanticized past period or some irrecoverable past condition or setting. Dang.
Oh,
Wow, I didn't realize nostalgia had such a depressing definition.
I don't want to ever feel nostalgic for anything ever again.
So, in other words, nostalgia is the feeling of you re experiencing something from the past that technically no longer exists.
So I know my dad is a car collector of sorts, and a retro vehicle, a retro car, is like an actual designation. And
Okay.
it's given to a car that is 20 years old or older. Now, if we take that same logic, that means that the retro games that are going to become retro here in January by car standards would be anything released in 2006, which, if we look at, that's deep into the PlayStation 2's lifetime. We're almost to the PlayStation 3. I think we're
Mhm.
actually into PlayStation 3 by 2006.
Yeah, 2006 is around the time when the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 came out.
Yeah, but here's the thing. The you look at like games that are getting released or games that are getting re-released, and it's a lot of games from that era. And those games still really stand up as opposed to like earlier 3D games. You pull out a PlayStation 1 game and it's not going to feel like it belongs anywhere. But Assassin's Creed still looks like it's part of the modern gaming series like scene now. And it's about that old. So, I guess my first question for you today, do you think the term retro like elongates? Do you think that there's a certain statute of technology, not just time, that determines if something is retro?
Taylor, make sure to cut this part out. The washing machine is being really loud, so I'll wait for it to stop before I answer.
The washing machine.
Sorry.
You don't need to apologize for the machinations of your own mind.
It's not the machinations of my own mind, it's the machinations of the washing machine.
Well,
Why don't you leave this part in just to be funny?
I I've been known to do stuff like that. Like, do you? Probably my proudest moment in podcasting is the intro to the first live video episode of the PLC podcast.
That one was crazy.
All right, so for the viewers out there and the listeners, so the PLC, we've talked about it before. It's an esports gaming group that Garrett and I both work with, and they have a podcast. And while Garrett is a co host on the podcast, I am a producer and editor on it. So I'm there, I just don't say anything. And for the first ever video episode, they had everyone in the same room for the first time. And it's like, we're going to make a video version. And they made a video version and gave two different intros for it. And then Garrett, in passing on the recording, said, "Oh, you know what would be funny is if Comic Crash, my tag on there, and also my YouTube channel, uh, if he played both intros at the same time next to each other." And so I did, and it was hilarious.
Yep. All right, the washing machine has calmed down. Thank you for stalling.
All right, that
What was your question again?
my question. It's okay. It's kind of a complicated question, but uh, it feels now that retro means less about time and more about technology. So, do you think the term retro changes depending on what kind of game we're talking about versus just how old it is?
Yeah, I could see that being a factor in it as well because, like, the 20 years cutoff, I'm not so sure how accurate that is to retro gaming, because I'm looking up a list out of curiosity games that came out in 2006. Sorry for people that are about to feel old for this. These games are going to reach 20 years old next year. Games like The Elder Scrolls Oblivion, Okami, Gears of War, Dead Rising, Marvel Ultimate Alliance, Lego Star
Oh,
Wars 2.
no.
There's so many games. The Legend of Spyro A New Beginning, which was the Spyro reboot.
Oh, we're getting a reboot now as a retro game? Ew.
Just like so many different games that I don't know if I can say they feel retro yet. As someone that replayed Marvel Ultimate Alliance a few years ago, yeah, it's a Xbox 360 game, but it doesn't feel old or retro to me, you know?
Yeah. I totally get that because it's kind of like I was hinting at or talking earlier is that something like Assassin's Creed, it it doesn't feel like it should be retro, but it's getting up there in years.
Hmm.
And there's been a lot of games in that series too. Like it's been around for a long time, and it's like I know it's been around for a long time. I can see that, but it doesn't feel like it has been. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that's because, it is HD gaming and that there hasn't been as big of a leap between even like PS3 era and PS5 era as far as graphical jump, or if it's because I myself don't think of myself as that old. And so I don't like thinking of games that were really cool and popular when I was playing games as being that old.
That's the thing is that, like, as someone that regularly goes back to play Xbox 360 and PS3 games, back in the day, I thought the graphics were so mind blowing, so cool. But now, where I am now with where gaming has gone, I can look back at those games and objectively realize that the graphics weren't like we have seen a lot of progress in graphics. Like, yeah, I think either I would argue probably PS1 to PS2. Nah, actually, PS2 to PS3 is probably the biggest graphical leap we've seen with gaming. But I would argue that the PS3 to PS4 was a big leap as well, but it's starting to slow down with how hyper realistic everything is now, you know? To the point where PS4, PS5, yeah, there's differences. Yeah, it's a more powerful console, but you still have really good looking games on PS4 that look good just alongside PS5 as well, you know?
I remember when they were two moments. They were introducing the PlayStation 5 and they were introducing the PlayStation 5 Pro.
Okay.
And to introduce the PlayStation 5, they showed Spider-Man playing alongside both the PS4 and PS5 hardware. And they
Okay.
did a graphical comparison. And like I could see a little bit of a graphical leap. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay, so there's a few more reflective surfaces. But then they made a big stink about how great the difference in is between the 5 and 5 Pro, and they showed it off using Horizon Zero Dawn. I will
Mm-hmm.
give 6 billion brownie points to anyone who could point out to me what the difference was because I could not see it. And it's like I'm saying, I think that's a big factor in what makes something retro is, they talk about nostalgia being a longing or an experiencing of something that no longer exists. But the graphical fidelity of the PS3 in my brain, PS3 and Xbox 360, is close enough to what we have now to where I don't feel like I'm looking into a bygone era.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think a big part of it is it's a very emotional definition as well because like, it's not a situation of it's a longing for, the game that no longer exists. It clearly still exists if you're able to play it and enjoy it. It's a longing for a time period we can never go back to.
Which I think also I've brought this up in a previous episode that I've been feeling kind of nostalgic for the PS2 right now,
Hmm.
which I guess would make the PS2 retro. But I think more so, it's less a longing for the PS2 and more a longing for just what the game market was like back then.
Yeah, I think that's a
Ugh.
good way to put it.
Yeah, because it's like, you put in the game and it just works. The whole game is there, bugs and all. If there's a bug, you just deal with it and you either play around it or you exploit it. And there was never going to be an update. You didn't have to sign into anything. The game just worked. And the game was fun. And there was a much bigger variety of games. And it's like I'm more nostalgic for that than I am for the game itself.
I would argue a lot of those games are still really fun. Like, I went back and replayed the entire Sly Cooper collection, and yeah, it had some jank and stuff, but those games hold up so well.
Yeah. Yeah, they totally do. Well, and like I think the quality of the game, no, I don't know if the quality of the game even matters, because how many of us will go back and play bad games just because we used to back in the day and it felt fun?
As someone that regularly played through Mort the Chicken on PS1, I get it.
All you ever do is play bad games.
No, I don't only play bad games. Just because I was playing two different bad games before we recorded this podcast episode doesn't mean I only play bad games.
What would you say is the split between bad games and like critically acclaimed good games?
I feel like that's a topic for another time. Because for me, I'm one of those weirdos that loves really bad games, but I also love really good games.
Yeah, I know. And I want to see what your percentage split is.
Okay. Here's my percentage split. Games that are 8 out of 10, and I don't mean like ranked by review companies, by the way. I mean personal internal rankings, okay?
All right.
So for me, personal internal rankings, games that are 8 out of 10 or higher are worth my time. And then games that are 3 out of 10 or lower are worth my time. Games that are like 4 out of 10s to like 7 out of 10s, they're not good enough to stand on their own to be enjoyable and memorable, but they're not bad enough to be such ridiculously bad games that they're fun, funny experiences where you run into ridiculous situations.
They're not quite the Spiderwick Chronicles.
Yeah, they're not quite the Spiderwick Chronicles, where that's a whole fun story right there, actually. Okay, there was one time Taylor came over after I was playing a copy of the Spiderwick Chronicles for the Xbox 360. And I was making jokes about how the game's so good because I was like, wow, look at how it runs at a consistent 60 FPS. And like just pointing out things like that. Wow, the music's really enjoyable in that game. When really the game's not really that good at all.
Oh, it was such an ugly game.
Yeah.
And like, I just remembered this weird rat thing going on. My scurry, 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 scurry. It's like, ugh.
Yep. That's Thimbletack. He's a brownie.
Yeah, well, I'll tell Thimbletack where he can stick his brownie.
Gotcha. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, I don't know. I get some kind of funny joy out of seeing like the weird jank, ridiculous cutscenes, ridiculous situations that happen from bad video games.
So, bringing this back to the topic then, do you think having a retro status can excuse poor game design?
Ooh, that's a very interesting question. Because the other thing is that, like, what's considered poor game design now may not have been considered poor game design at the time, you know?
Sure. And I admit that there is a certain amount of optimization that happens, right? Like first person shooters on the Nintendo 64, like GoldenEye. GoldenEye it controls and plays completely differently than I would say the game that figured it out was Halo.
Yeah, that's fair.
But then after Halo happened and created the optimum controls for a first-person shooter, everyone who makes a first-person shooter, they have that same control scheme. You play Battlefield, it has the same control scheme as Call of Duty and Gears of War. It's all the same.
Yeah, and that makes sense because, don't fix something if it's not broken. But also, on the other hand, not only is it like, oh, things were new, yeah, nowadays, objectively, you could say it was poor game design for GoldenEye. But on the flip side, you had to remember they were working with an N64 controller that has one control stick.
Yeah.
So, like, you can only do so much with that. It was to the point where they actually incorporated different control settings so you could choose what you wanted.
So I guess then the more accurate statement for the question is, are you willing to look past jank and to look past what are we now know are bad controls for the sake of retro-ness?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And I actually have been playing a game that's making me think about that specifically. Do you know the game Conker's Bad Fur Day?
Yeah.
Okay, in Conker's Bad Fur Day, the general platforming controls are fine. I played through the entire N64 Conker's Bad Fur Day, but dang, did I have a lot of points in that game where I was getting really frustrated. And part of the reason is because they had third person shooter segments, but the control scheme for it was a nightmare. So first and foremost, it's reverse controls for aiming, which my brain has a
Oh,
hard time with that.
gross.
Yeah, I don't know why, but my brain has a very hard time with reverse controls for aiming.
Well,
Um,
because you're a person, you're not an airplane. You're not supposed to aim like an airplane.
that's fair. But on top of that, so you would go into a standard aim mode by holding the button, right?
Yeah.
And normally you would then just use the N64 control stick to aim. Okay, that was kind of the standard approach. However, they decided to add another aspect into it in order to let you move around, where you could use the C buttons on the N64 controller to move. Now, the issue here is you are now using the left stick, which is normally used for moving your character to aim, and then the right C buttons with your right hand to move your character.
Oh, that feels weird to think about. But the
Yeah, so
Nintendo
imagine.
64 controller is hard to think about.
Very true. Funny enough, I think GoldenEye had a solid fix for that actually.
Oh,
GoldenEye had two control schemes that address the main control issues. The first was that you put your left hand on the left prong of the N64 controller and your right hand on the middle prong, which, no one would ever hold the N64 controller that way ever.
no.
But here's the thing. What it then did was it gave you dual analog controls because you could use the D-pad on the left side to move and then the right stick to aim.
There you go.
And then
But
they also, oh, sorry.
didn't they also think about putting GoldenEye on the other consoles, which would have allowed dual analog stick controls?
Yeah, that would have been nice. They had another workaround for that actually, where there was a control scheme where if you plugged in two N64 controllers, you would hold each one in each hand and it would be dual analog that way.
Not the worst solution.
Yeah, of course, not the worst solutions, but I just thought it was funny how they would innovate with stuff like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point I was trying to bring up with all that, though, is that I'm currently replaying Conker's Bad Fur Day through Conker Live and Reloaded, which is the Xbox original remake of it.
Okay.
So I'm interested to see how the shooter segments control now that it's like the go-to standard Xbox controller.
Well, then my interest would be in, does it get rid of the retro feel if you update the controls to be more modernly sensible?
Yeah, that's a good point as well.
All right. So
Yeah.
the next thing, though, and I've been thinking about this, we've been talking a lot about 3D games, but 3D games have changed a lot more, I would argue, than 2D games did. Do you think there is a double standard, though, where it's easier for a 2D game to become retro?
Oh, 100%. People associate 2D nowadays with retro. I think that's been the case even ever since like the PS2, PS3 era of gaming. That 2D equals retro because we don't have graphics like that anymore.
Well, I think a good indication of that is in Sonic Generations. like 2D Sonic is designated classic Sonic.
Hmm.
And honestly, the set the original Sega Sonic games really weren't all that old by that point.
They came out in the 90s, so probably 15 to 20 years old, I believe.
Yeah. So I guess they were getting up there, but like uh, the fact that 2D was automatically designated as classic without like any question, I think is really interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting. And then it leaves us in this weird area, like you were explaining, where um we'll naturally be like, oh, you know, 2D games are obviously retro, but then what does that mean for 3D games? And on top of that, what about 2D style games that are modern? Like for example, Street Fighter, it's always had a 2D control scheme with a few exceptions, but we
Mhm.
don't consider Street Fighter 6, the most recent game, to be a retro game, even though it's strictly 2D controls. Uh, I do understand there's 3D models, but we do get games that are, just flat out 2D design, 2D sprites that are modern games nowadays. Balatro is a 2D sprite game, but that is not retro at all.
Yeah. Well, like I think the most we get games that are like retro inspired
Hmm.
and people describe them as retro, but they're brand new. They're just, invoking the spirit of what was older. Like we have this new side scrolling Marvel beat 'em up. What's it called? Cosmic something.
Uh, yeah. So there's a new 3D uh game that just came out. We had the Cosmic Shake that released not too long ago, then like a few years ago or something, and then the Tides of Terror, I think it's called, is the newest one that just came out like a month or so ago.
I don't know. I'm talking about Marvel Cosmic Invasion.
Oh, whoops, my bad. I thought you were talking about SpongeBob.
Oh, no, no. I'm talking about Marvel Comic Invasion. Cosmic
Okay,
Invasion.
yeah, that's a good example. It's a brand new game, but it's strictly retro style.
Yeah, it's retro style where they take the costumes that these characters are known for from like the 90s and that's what they wear, and it's 2D and it's a side scroller and it is brand new, like brand spanking new, but everyone describes it as retro because it, like I said, it calls on the spirit of games past for its aesthetic, but not even its gameplay style. Well, maybe some ways, but it retro seems to just kind of mean if it looks old, which I think makes this such an interesting topic because we have games that are old but don't look it, and so it feels weird to call them retro. But then we have brand new games that do look old and they are described as retro, even though no one's platted it yet because it's just too new.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to consider and a lot to go through.
Yeah, but I think also there's something to be said for earlier. I mentioned that I didn't like saying Assassin's Creed was a retro game because I remember when it was brand new and I was there for it. And I don't like saying it's retro because what does that say about me? And I
That's
and
another
I
good point.
Yeah. And I bring this up because on the comic book side of things, that there is something really fascinating that has happened when we're talking about like retro comics. You've heard me talk about like throw terms around like golden age and silver age and such, right?
Yes, I remember you mentioning those.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, when you're talking about comic book history, you've got various uh, time frames that are given a name. And it's usually like the golden age is from 1938 with the introduction of Superman to the end of the war. And then you have a lot of people have been calling it the atomic age, which is from the end of the war to the introduction of Barry Allen in 56 Silver Age from 56 up to 70, so that one lasted a little bit longer. And then from 70 to 85 is the Bronze Age. But what's crazy to me is that from 85 up to now, they still claim that is all just within the modern age, regardless of how much has changed from that point. And like in the industry, how much the characters have changed, how much art styles have changed. Nobody wants to split that because, generally speaking, readers of American comics are a little bit older now and they don't like thinking that time has progressed that much.
That's a very interesting point, actually.
Yeah. So, like, you have the 90s that are widely different than the 80s. People leaving and creating their own studios. You would think that if I were to sit down and redefine it, I would say that the introduction of the Ninja Turtles was the beginning of a new age.
Okay,
Uh,
why is that specifically, if you don't mind me asking?
well, it's because that was like the first time that an indie developed comic came out and made mainstream success. And from there, it proved that you don't need to be connected to one of the major studios to be successful with your comic. And then we started getting Image and Dark Horse and Boom and like all of these smaller independent studios showing up and making big names for themselves. And it's like I want to say that's the beginning of a new age, but like when you sit down and talk with most comic book fans, and I'll go ahead and give them the term historians, they don't like thinking that time has progressed that much, and they still apply, the last 35 years into one age when things like the Bronze Age lasted, 15, or the Silver Age lasted maybe 12.
That's interesting.
And so I guess the question there is kind of the same question we've been trying to figure out is, uh, does the person's age play a difference into what they would consider to be retro?
I would argue yes, since it's based around those feelings.
So when you're hanging out with your fun Gen A friends, the kids right now who are less than 10, and they grow up, become teenagers, and they say Baldur's Gate 3 is such a retro game. How are we going to feel about that?
I'm not sure if I don't know how I would feel about that.
It's like, no, it's not. This game is brand new.
And they're like, no, it isn't. But that's a good point though, because there are kids nowadays that have not kids, but there are adults nowadays that like grew up playing like PS3 and PS4 games when they were kids,
Yeah.
So
Like,
to them, that's a callback to the nostalgic time they're familiar with.
exactly. So this is kind of a more personal question then. But if you were to pick a year for retro to start for you, where would you say that line is?
Oh, jeez, okay. I think my best approach is to look up game releases for years and make my way back until it feels retro.
Fantastic. I like this game. Let's play this game together. This sounds like a fun game.
All right, games that came out in 2005. We got games like Psychonauts, Resident Evil 4. Okay, Shadow of the Colossus. Ooh. Kingdom Hearts 2.
Oh,
Shadow the Hedgehog, Sly 3. But
see,
I don't know, I'm feeling pretty conflicted here.
yeah, I'm with you. Okay, tell me if you're feeling the same way here. You're saying these titles, and I would tell you that Sly 3 is a retro game, and I would tell you Psychonauts is, and I would even probably tell you that Kingdom Hearts 2 is, as much as I hate to admit that. I could not bring myself to tell you that Resident Evil 4 or Shadow of the Colossus are.
I get where you're coming from. To me, it's like, yeah, Psychonauts. That's obviously a retro game. But yeah, Resident Evil 4, Shadow of the Colossus. I'm like, that doesn't feel retro to me. Funny enough, okay, you ready for this weirdness?
Yeah.
I would argue that Sly 3 does not feel retro to me, but Sly 1 and 2 do.
Ooh, interesting. Why do you think makes that difference?
It might partially be because of the time periods when I was playing them. When I was playing Sly 2, I was in middle school, okay?
Okay.
And then when I was playing Sly 1, I was in elementary school. Then I didn't get Sly 3 as soon as it came out. I got it later. And by that point, I was in high school. So I think that's where the distinction in my mind is coming from. So maybe for me, it's more so based on what I did. Because technically, Sly 3 came out. Wait, no, that doesn't check out. No, I definitely played Sly 3 in middle school as well. But for some
Like
reason, that feel
your
retro to me.
emotional attachment to it isn't from middle school.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I think it is? I think
What's
Resident
up?
Evil 4 doesn't feel retro to me because it recently had a really big remake re-release that was extremely faithful to the original.
That's true, and same with Shadow of the Colossus as well.
Yeah. So when you say those games, I'm thinking about the PS4 and 5 versions,
Hmm.
but it's because those games are like good enough and they they remade the original well enough to where I kind of substitute the original for those ones.
That's very interesting. Yeah, like in your mind, I get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, so I would say for my brain, it's somewhere in the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube era, but I don't know if I can definitively put 2004 as feeling retro. Let's look at 2005. Let's look at 2004. 2004 had Sly 2, Jack 3, Tony Hawk Underground 2, Spider Man 2. Oh, yeah, I'm feeling
More of those feel
Doom
retro to
3.
me.
Yeah, I maybe in my personal brain, 2004 is roughly the cutoff for what feels retro, which would check out because let me do some quick math here. Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense then. 2004 would have been my last year in elementary school, I believe, and 2005 would have been when I started middle school. So maybe it's that cutoff for me when I'm around 11, 12 years old is what doesn't feel retro. And that would be, yeah, roughly 20 years ago.
This reminds me of something that I saw recently. I think it was the author of Goosebumps.
Okay, R.L. Stein.
Yeah. Uh, he mentioned that like I think it was an interview. I don't remember the exact context or the exact quote, so forgive me for that. But someone was asking him if he ever felt regretful that he only ever made books for kids and like he never made any horrors for adults. And he said that he liked it because he had the 11 and 12-year-olds and argued that was the last truly captive audience. Because after that, once you hit puberty, you've hit kind of this point where like your priorities shift pretty drastically and your opinions and vision of the world is shifted very drastically. And you mentioned all those 2004 games. I was in 4th grade, and all of those feel retro to me.
Yeah, I could say that as well. Yeah, they feel retro to me as well. I'm pretty sure 2005. I want to say 2005 was the year I was starting middle school, maybe, but I'm not certain.
Let's see, I was in 5th grade, and the way we did that, 5th grade was the last year in elementary school. And then 6th and 7th were middle. And then 8th and ninth were at the junior high. And then 10 through 12 was at the high school. It was kind of a weird split. Uh, they adjusted it after I left middle school and shifted things around a little bit. But yeah, so that would have been at that point. I remember I was thinking I was like the cool big kid. I was top of the totem pole now, and I felt very in charge. But then if you were to go to 2006,
Mhm.
you mind pulling up the 2006 games for me real quick? I want to test the theory.
I just double checked, by the way, and 2005, that summer, was when I started middle school.
Oh, rock on. Happy birthday.
Thank you. 2006. Okay, let's test your theory. You ready?
Yeah.
Yeah. Zelda Twilight Princess, Okami, Guitar Hero 2, New Super Mario Bros., Marvel Ultimate Alliance, Dead Rising, Gears of War, Bully, just to name a few.
Yeah, none of those feel retro to me. So my theory was going to be, in sixth grade when I'm back at the bottom of the totem pole, did these things mean more to me? But I guess not. So
Gotcha, yeah.
yeah, I guess maybe that's the cutoff. Maybe when you're 11 and 12 is when retro starts because there's like a sense of innocence that you can never regain from being 11.
Yeah, I could see that with that, at least in the US, because I'm sure maybe it feels different in other countries where schools are organized differently.
Yeah, maybe. Or like maybe even in different parts of the US where maybe the population is a little bit smaller, so the schools encompass more grades in them.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
I think there is something to be said that like when you're 11 or 12 is kind of the designated ending for childhood. And you and I both look at those games and say, "Oh yeah, those are retro," but it's like the next year they feel like they aren't.
yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. So it's kind of funny how you bring up like collectors with cars because it seems like they might have cracked the code by saying roughly 20 years, even though it doesn't feel that way. And that's the question is 10 years from now, are you and I going to feel like games that are 20 years old are retro? Or are we going to be stuck with our previous views of no games from 2004 or earlier, or a few games from 2005 are retro?
That's interesting that you say that. I recently, okay, I know that you don't play Fortnite very much, or that I at least play it a lot more than you do.
I
But
played it for a little bit when Fortnite Festival came out,
yeah, I got you into Battle Royale once. But
and I was not good.
no, well, I wasn't either, so it's okay. Uh, they they made a mode called Fortnite OG, right? And
Yeah, I've heard of
it's
that.
it's the same map and the same assets that were in the original Fortnite. Uh, prior to uh, there's a big shift when they got their first collaborative skin. That's when a lot of people point at Fortnite and say this is the moment that changed everything. Kind of like how we point at the stupid horse armor in Oblivion and say, "Oh yeah, that's the beginning of all of our problems with DLC." But uh, Fortnite OG emulates what Fortnite was like before that first collab skin. And when I was walking around there, I felt the nostalgia. Like I saw this. It's like, oh, the buildings look different. Everything's a little bit more craggly. Everything's a little bit more skewampus because before they had collaboration skins, this looked just fine. But if you take a collaboration skin of like a real person and put it in there, it's going to look weird. It's going to look out of place, right?
Yeah,
But like exploring those maps and like the early Fortnite aesthetic, it feels retro to me, even though it really wasn't all that long ago. And I think a big part of that is because the game has changed so much. So, maybe we will get to the point where you and I will see the PS3 as retro, but I think before we can get to that point, we're going to have to see a bigger graphical leap or a bigger stylized leap from where we're at today.
so funny you should bring that up because I've had something similar happen to me regarding League of Legends,
Oh,
where they eventually remade the Summoner's Rift, which is the main map you play. Okay.
okay.
So with that in mind, I'm going to send you two screenshots real quick. One is what the original map looks like, and the other is what the map looks like now.
Okay, I'm seeing this. It's a little bit more low poly, but like not low poly in a bad way, but like stylized. And
Yeah, and then
that could be another thing. I want to make this point before I lose it that uh the limitations of graphical hardware I'm sure play a lot into how we feel about how things look. But yeah, so there is a marked difference between these two.
Yeah, but like even though the new map is objectively better from a design standpoint and from a, like polygon and a overall look standpoint, I don't know, something I still prefer the old map because I have that nostalgic sense of, oh, how League used to be. And I'm sure if I went back and played now, League would be a balanced nightmare that just like is super unbalanced. But I don't know, just like I sometimes long to go back to those older days of League back when I was playing it in like 2011, 2012 versus now.
Well, I think this here is evidence that it's not, and oh, there's a topic here. I think here is evidence that it's not just about the time, because 2011, that's late high school for both of us, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. It's at that point, I think it's less about the time we were playing and the fact that there is a physical difference in this game that we're still playing today, but like it looks different, it feels different. It's really not the same game anymore.
gotcha. So maybe with live service games specifically, that speeds up the process.
Well, I've met people who feel nostalgic for Minecraft 1.0.
Yeah, I have as well.
And if I mean, if you look at the best-selling video games or like the current bestsellers that show up on any game store, on any console store right now, the top numbers have not changed for a very long time. Minecraft has always been up there. Fortnite has always been up there. Uh, like these games that just have ridiculous staying power and are, rather than getting a sequel, they're just updated as time goes on. I think people will end up looking back at like screenshots or videos of the earlier updates or the earlier seasons and battle passes and be like, "Oh yeah, that was something else. That is retro League. That is retro World of Warcraft, you know?"
Yeah, it's really cool and interesting to see for sure. Yeah, but I don't know, like, because retro I feel like is a big discussion and a big talking point in the video game community. What's it like in the comic book community? Is that really a big talking point, or do people not really care as much about it, or how does that work?
Well, I mean, especially in the collector community, age means a lot.
That makes sense.
And especially with uh you know, it being a very visual medium, the art styles and art choices, they do follow trends as time goes on. And there is a lot of demand for going back to earlier styles. Like uh you look at like the golden age, you look at the late 30s and 40s comics, and I don't think anyone truly wants to go back to that because it was crude, it was rudimentary, it was very basic. But people look at like the early 90s and look at when Todd McFarlane was starting out, or when Chris Claremont got his team of artists on X-Men, and uh, people want that kind of art to stick around. And those specific artists, they have a lot of staying power where they keep coming back to either do a cover every so often or they will do a book once in a while. And it's always a big deal when they come back.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I think that maybe that plays into why the ages of comics slowed down, because we still get really excited when an artist from the 80s shows up and does a book. But it's these are but that's kind of how it's always been. I remember there was a book released in 1985. It was kind of like the final word on Wonder Woman. Like Wonder Woman died in Crisis on Infinite Earths, and this book was kind of her in memoriam wake eulogy type book, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
And the artist for that one opted to draw everything like it was back in her first appearance back in the early 40s. And for me, that became kind of a barrier of entry for enjoying that book because I was kind of distracted by this looks a lot older than it should. But I'm sure at the time people were really excited about it.
It makes you wonder if they should do that even more often, like maybe recreate modern stories and old art styles.
Maybe. You know, I remember, and I keep thinking about this, reading this thing where when they were making Breath of the Wild, that they first made the map and a playable 2D top down demo in the style of the original Zelda. And it's like, you release that, you're going to make numbers with it, like people are going to buy it. And it's an interesting mashup of, oh, this is the old way that we did things, but this is a brand new game or newish game. Breath of the Wild is getting a little bit older now, which
Mhm.
time keeps on marching, I guess.
Yep.
But the I guess to answer that question, yeah, I think there is a certain excitement and nostalgia whenever someone like Dan Jurgens comes out of retirement and draws a book, and all of a sudden the book instantly feels like it's from 1992. And sometimes I wonder if that excitement is to the detriment of being able to move forward.
Why do you feel that, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, it's like whenever let's go back to Dan Jurgens as an example because Dan Jurgens is fantastic. We like Dan.
Okay.
When Dan writes a book or when Dan draws a book, he's a writer and artist. The complete package, triple threat. Whenever he shows up, the book does better. And so publishers are incentivized to bring him back more often, even if he is a little bit more expensive, because they have to pull him out of retirement and beg and please him to do things.
Okay.
And then superstar artists that are younger and have been coming up, I feel like they don't get the chance to make a name for themselves as easily because, uh, yeah, you've shown up and you've been drawing Spider Man for the last 12 issues, let's say. That's not
Mhm.
the greatest example, but we'll use that as an example. The big superheroes typically hold on to the legendary artists a little bit longer. But let's say a brand new person showed up and has been drawing Spider Man for the past 12 months, and the stories have been good, and the art has been good. But then Todd McFarlane shows up and he does half an issue 13 months in, and that issue sells way, 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 way more. And that's the issue everyone pays attention to. And the new artist kind of gets glossed over because they were just the person who was keeping the seat warm for the legend to come back.
Okay, I see.
Lately, we've gotten Dan Mora. Dan Mora is probably the biggest superstar artist right now, and he's probably the newest one. Dude literally had to draw everything in order to get to this point. Like he was drawing Justice League, he was drawing Batman, Superman, he was drawing Superman, he was drawing Action Comics and Detective Comics. Like he was drawing all of it at one point. And it seemed like that was what needed to happen to turn him into the newest superstar.
Okay, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, DC just has him locked up in some basement somewhere and they slip him a few crackers every so often and force him to draw superheroes. Let Dan go home. Let Dan Mora go home.
Yeah, that's very interesting to see kind of that other side where like it's almost like retro is celebrated heavily, not in the sense of like going back and looking at those old comics, but more so in the sense of, oh, we're bringing this classic legend back to make it.
Yeah, and I I've seen something similar happen in video games. You and I are both fans of Nitro Rad. I lost the name for a second.
Yes.
But Nitro Rad, he does a really good job of showing off new indie games that are made to emulate the style of bygone consoles.
Hmm.
And I think that's kind of the same thing here. While the console doesn't change for comics, it's always paper. It's always going to be paper. Uh, Even if it's digital paper, it's still paper. A picture is a picture.
Yeah.
Uh, Even though the console doesn't change, you could say that the artist, or maybe even the writer artist team, is what makes it retro. And so they'll bring that back to kind of celebrate as a new, as like a celebration of the past, but we aren't necessarily looking back. We're still moving forward. We're just using the same people from before. And now we have indie horror games that are like, oh, this is a brand new game. We're not necessarily uh reverting, but we are using the aesthetic and stylings and even control schemes of the past to create a specific feeling of eeriness.
I think the old styles work extremely well for horror games, especially. And I think a big reason of that is nothing will be more powerful in making something scary than what your mind comes up with.
Uh-huh.
And like, okay, I'm going to go to one of my favorite PS1 games, Kudelka, okay?
Okay.
And in that game, I remember being super creeped out about some of the enemy designs, even though it was low fidelity, 2000s PS1 game. Like, there's one monster design in that game that specifically, like, creeped me out. It didn't even creep me out at first. It was like this weird, like, humanoid monster thing with, like, kind of a bag over its head. And I noticed that, like, its left arm was missing. I was like, okay, that's kind of strange. And then, like, from the bottom half down, I should specify. So, like, elbow onward, the right arm's missing. And I noticed the left arm had, like, a weird, like, blocky thing attached to it, right?
Mhm.
But the closer I looked and the more my imagination run wild, I soon realized what it was it was the other half of his arm and his hand tied at the wrists to the right hand.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, so it's like this, oh my gosh, his arms were bound behind him backwards and he literally ripped off half of his left arm to have freer movements.
Oh. But like what made that probably creepier was the fact that you kind of had to sit there and think about it and figure it out.
Yeah, I had to sit there and think about it, figure it out. I had to look closer at the design, like, what is that thing on his arm? And then once my brain finally put together what I was looking at, that made it so much creepier and it gave a backstory in essence or a creepy idea to this passing monster that I'm fighting in combat.
That's spooky.
And it's also a turn-based game, so because of that, I had time to be able to process what I was looking at and really look at it?
Uh-huh.
So yeah, just yeah, I think lower poly, lower detailed stuff can lead to like bigger scares and bigger creep outs.
Well, there's a book by Scott McCloud, and he talks a little bit. It's called Understanding Comics. I love it so much. I try to go through it pretty regularly. But he talks a little bit about how powerful cartoons are, and it's because the simplified designs force your brain to kind of have to make up what's going on in the spaces that don't feel realistic. And so you get really, really invested because you're filling in the empty spaces of a cartoon with your own experience. And I think the same thing can happen when you're looking at older technology. You're looking at these old low poly models, and it's like, that doesn't exactly look like anything I've seen. So I'm kind of having to do a little bit of harder mental work to finish the picture.
I think a good example of that, by the way, is Resident Evil 3. I think the enemy Nemesis looks much creepier in the original PS1 version than in the remake.
You know what? I would agree. I would agree.
Like, yeah, he's bigger and chases you around and stuff as well in the remake, but I don't know. That low poly design is so much creepier because your brain's trying to fill in the gaps, like you said.
So we're coming up a little bit to the end of this here. Uh, if I were to, let's go ahead and summarize, I think, what we've learned today. So retro is kind of like this weird case where it is both a feeling as well as something that you could almost mathematically figure out. But that math seems
Yeah.
to be individual.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And it also makes you wonder, like, if we go and we talk to gamers who grew up playing like the NES or the SNES, if they would feel like PS1 or PS2 is retro, you know?
That's really interesting because yeah, I would be curious about that. I personally I have one friend that he was actively gaming during the NES era. Like his first console was an Atari, but he didn't quite remember that super well. He started gaming on the NES, like seriously, right?
Hmm.
So I'll have to ask him and then maybe come back and report what he has to say about where he draws the line on retro.
Yeah, that'd be really awesome if you could do that because that'll give us a bit more data about, as time progresses, do we become more open and feel like more games are retro, or are we kind of stuck in our boxes of childhood when it comes to retro?
Right, because it's like you said, the car people figured out it's 20 years, but we both sat here and figured out that it kind of the retro line starts somewhere between 11 and 12.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I wonder if that's like a consistent thing where 11 years old is where it starts for people emotionally, or if at some point people do accept a designated year marker.
Yeah, and I don't know if we'll ever get to the point where people accept a designated year marker, but even if they don't, it's all good. It's about the conversation and what we're feeling with it.
Yeah. So we figured that out, and then we figured that also retro it can be an aesthetic if it's harkening to kind of an era that has long been since past or a trend that is in the past and has not really come back for a foothold.
Exactly. Yeah, I would agree with that. Where you have the retro aesthetic, where they're calling upon inspiration from the past, and they're able to use that to make it feel retro without it actually being retro.
Yeah, and I think you and I can also accept that. Well, I'm not going to speak for you, but I can accept that a retro feel can be newer than what I consider to be retro because I look at something like Hat in Time and I can accept that as being a retro inspired game, even though its main inspiration is newer than where I would put my personal retro line.
Yeah, I getcha. And on the flip side, with games like Ukulele slash Yuga Replayly, yeah, it has modernized graphics, but it still feels retro because it's harkening back to the Banjo Kazooie era.
Yeah, like the gameplay is kind of retro, or the gameplay loop
Yeah.
anyway.
Ooh, I
Whereas,
think
go ahead.
I was just gonna add, I think the gameplay loop is a good way to put it.
Yeah, because uh, the whole idea of like you're running around this somewhat open area, there's an occasional puzzle here and there, and every puzzle is trying to collect, the Pizza Planet token or whatever else. Like that feels very of a time. And if a new game was released that made that, I would describe it as retro, even if it looked completely new.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. All
So,
right, well,
with all of
yeah,
that said, the only question I have left is for you, Garrett, and it's if you have any wise words of wisdom for us.
you cut me off before I could ask you.
Uh, Sometimes that's how it goes. I made you introduce it, like I twisted your arm into introducing the episode. I will make you send us off.
Oh, okay. I like how your definition of twisting my arm was asking me, "Hey, you want to do the intro?" And I said, "Okay."
But it shakes things up a little bit, keeps it fresh, keeps it new.
Fair enough, fair enough. Okay. Wise words of wisdom. Let's see here. While retro and nostalgic stuff is a lot of fun and is really good, and you should definitely go back and experience older games, like whether you grew up with them or not. It never hurts to look to the future either, because despite all the crazy shenanigans that go on in the video game industry, there is still good that we see come out regularly. So keep your eye out. Look for the gold and for the good games among the very by the numbers copy and paste games we see nowadays.
I've been playing the newer Indiana Jones game, and one of the
How is
themes
it?
in it. Oh, it's a great game. I love it. It's my game of the year. It will never win a game of the year award. It will never win any awards, but it is my game of the year.
Well, there you go. Anyway, you were saying?
I got to kill a Nazi with a used toilet brush. That's what made it my game of the year.
I mean, to be fair, I don't think I've ever played a game where I got to kill a Nazi with a used toilet brush.
You should pick up Indiana Jones. It's a rush.
Gotcha.
But one of the main themes of it um, is Indiana Jones had just broken up with Marion Ravenwood. How well do you remember the movie?
Not super well. I watched it as a kid.
Oh, I'm going to have to twist your arm and make you watch Indiana Jones. Okay, never mind. Let me try this again. So, one of the big themes of the game is the question of looking to the past versus living in it. And I think that, especially when it comes to popular media like these, or TV shows or movies, it's so easy to get caught up in, well, these past movies are a success, and that means that they must be better. Or this comic in the past was better, or this game in the past was better. And, while we can appreciate the past, there is the trap that we could get stuck in it. And I think that's what keeps, that's what turns people from being, fun and interesting to being old and crotchety is back in my day. And, uh, you know, it's fine to look at the past, but it's important to always keep moving forward because the good old days weren't always good and the future isn't as bleak as it seems.
I get what you mean. Yeah, I we definitely see that in the gaming industry a lot. There's this running joke in the gaming industry where there's a difference between Legend of Zelda fans and Ocarina of Time fans.
Yeah.
Because Ocarina of Time fans, like, you can. Okay, here's the thing. You can enjoy Ocarina of Time and be a fan of it without being what I'm dubbing an Ocarina of Time fan. When I say Ocarina of Time fan, I'm referring to people who, in essence, say if it's not Ocarina of Time, it's a bad game, even if it's associated with Zelda, even if it's a beloved game. Like, and then, like, it's just the idea of, okay, well, we always need to, just copy Ocarina of Time. But even as Nintendo followed that formula, they realized they weren't making Ocarina of Time fans happy. So I think that's the point when they said, you know what, forget this. And they started making games like Breath of the Wild. They were like, we're just going to focus on making a good game we like. And I think that's where the like old crotchety attitude comes in. Is it's like, well, this is an Ocarina of Time. It's not exactly like that, so it's a bad game. We don't want to fall into that by getting stuck and living in the past.
Yeah. And I mean, the fact that we are looking at the kids now and they're going to grow up and they're going to look back at Baldur's Gate 3 as being this old retro game and that is not nearly as good as what's coming out. That must prove then that, things are always continually improving and getting cooler. So, if I were to add on to your wise words of wisdom, I think I would just say be excited about the future, be excited about what's coming. And, you don't need to be excited to the detriment of your appreciation of the past. Definitely hold on to where you came from, but make sure you're interested in moving forward as well.
Yeah, and to bring up some of those other games like Claire Obscure, I don't think would have been possible or would have been as good on older hardware if it was made on the PS2 or the PS3. I think the graphics and the visuals they were able to make was what was able to enhance the amazing formula they had. And same goes for Astrobot. Part of the big appeal for Astrobot's not only the graphics and the nostalgia to, simpler times of 3D platformers, but how it's also a celebration of PlayStation history that wouldn't have been possible if they released it on like the PS1 or the PS2.
Well, and then Baldur's Gate, what made that game such a big deal was that it was made like a modern game, but it was marketed and it was treated like an older game. Like, you know, they got so much praise for that game because they followed the business practices of what is now a bygone era, but something we all want them to go back to.
Yeah, exactly.
So take the lessons of the past and bring them with you into the future.
Yep, that's the yeah. Oh, that's such a good point too, because all three of those games, Clair Obscur, Baldur's Gate 3, Astrobot, were building upon fundamentals of gaming that we've seen from like the 90s and the early 2000s.
Yeah. Yeah, they were bringing back that. Whereas, like so many games that surround them keep trying to reinvent the old wheel to where you can't recognize it anymore.
Yeah, like think of how many looter shooters we've had over the years, or how many, attempts to copy Fortnite we've seen because they're just tracing that trend, chasing that trend, and trying to recreate the same formula over and over again, but they're being lazy about it and not innovating. And I think that's the big thing is that games like Baldur's Gate 3, Clair Obscur, and Astrobot, they're innovating on those old ideas, and that's what interests gamers.
Wow. We got deep on this episode.
Yeah, go figure.
We faced our own mortality and said, "What's up?"
All right, well, in that case, I do want to thank you for joining me today, Taylor, on this episode of GC Squared, and thank you all for joining in and listening. Please feel free to, send us any mail via fan mail on our email that I can't remember the name of, but I'm sure Taylor will add a tag at the end that of our usual spiel we do for the closeout.
Well, I could just say it right now. It's
Okay.
GC Squared at gmail.com. So that's GCSQUARED at gmail.com. Go ahead.
Oh, wait. Is it GC Squared Podcast at gmail.com?
Oh, shoot. You're right. It's GC Squared Podcast.
Maybe I do remember.
Wow. Oh, we are the best at podcasting.
I know, right?
So send us an email at gcsquaredpodcast at gmail.com, GCSQUARED podcast at gmail.com. I promise we do look at it. We don't remember what it's called, but we do look at it. And we do.
We may or may not. We have the login saved, so it's easy enough to pull up.
Right. You do have the login saved, right? Like it's...
Yeah, I have the login saved.
Oh, good. Yeah, so we do have the login saved. So we'll look at them, we'll read the emails, and we'll check it out. And they usually do turn into an episode topic on the podcast. So, send in your thoughts. We'd love to see them.
Yeah, thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Bye.